Welcome, everybody. Thank you for registering and attending our 2022 PSA Annual Update webinar. We started hosting this webinar a couple of years ago. It's every October, usually scheduled for 90 minutes in English. And we started hosting this just to give everybody sort of a singular webinar to attend an update on PSA policies, potential updates to the FSMA produce safety rule, other related regulations, discussion of resources, and hopefully it's sort of a one-stop shop to help you all prepare for your winter PSA grower training courses or other produce safety courses. Just a reminder that today's webinar is being recorded. So after we wrap up, we'll clean up the recording and we will be posting this recording on the PSA trainer updates page, as well as a PDF of the presentation slides. This year, we are also excited to announce that we're hosting the equivalent of this webinar in Spanish as well. So historically, we do this as an English language webinar, and then we translate the presentation slides into Spanish. But this year, we are doing this entirely in Spanish as well. And that webinar will be hosted November 30th from 2 to 4 p.m. Eastern time. And Rob just dropped that registration link in the chat box. So for anybody who would prefer to attend the Spanish language webinar, or maybe you just want to attend both, feel free to register for that one. Okay, and I will say I'm just very excited to see everybody, a lot of familiar faces. So I'm excited to answer your questions and kind of chat with you over the next 90 minutes. So as we get started, a couple of reminders. Because this is a Zoom webinar format, all participants are muted. There will be time for questions and discussion throughout the meeting, and there are a couple of ways that you can try to ask your questions. First, you can use the chat box. We have sort of whoever on the PSA team who is not currently presenting is going to be monitoring the chat box and helping to answer questions. Same with the Q&A. So you can use the Q&A to ask questions, or if you would prefer to verbally ask your question, you can raise your hand and I will, or one of my other hosts will be able to unmute you. And as I mentioned, this session is recorded and will be shared via the listserv and on our website after the call. And with that, I am going to turn it over to Betsy.
Hello, everyone. Thank you, Donna, so much for that introduction. As you can see from the agenda, I think any agenda for an hour meeting that has 10 bullet points is perhaps how the PSA overdoes everything. So we're going to go through a lot of things. We're going to go through them as quickly and concisely as we can. Thankfully, there's several PSA team members that are going to take a turn presenting, so you don't have to listen to one of us for the entire hour. I do want to stress, though, that if you have questions or something is not clear, please do jump in the chat box, because we're all here to help and clarify where we can. Again, we're going to go through team updates, training metrics, remote and online training updates, policy updates, trainer resources, general resources, updates from FDA, Spanish language efforts, international updates. I'm reading these in case somebody is on the phone, sorry, and updates on PSA funding timeline. So these are just 10 of the many topics we're going to discuss. And we'll start off with the PSA Alliance team. And it's funny because Tommy and I had a call this morning and he was talking about when he joined, we were kind of a smaller group, right? So we're a bigger group, and I do want to highlight everybody on this slide, but in particular, I'd like to draw your eyes to the folks that are outlined in red here, starting with Mariana Villarreal, who joined us in February. You want to say hello, Mariana?
Hello, everyone.
She's been a great addition, and she's going to be presenting some slides today, so you'll get to hear her voice. The other one is Collins Bujingo. Collins, you want to say hello?
Hey, everyone. Nice to meet you.
Collins joined us in July, I believe, and has already moved. So, so he started in Montana, and now he's based in Washington, but he's the Northwest Extension Specialist. And lastly is Thais. they're kind of in the dark a little bit, Thais, but you want to unmute and say hello?
Hello, everyone.
Thais just joined us last week, so she's very new and trying to get herself organized to what the PSA team is about. We're super happy to have all of them join us this year, we're super happy, period. But we're also very thankful for all of the PSA team members that are here. For those of you that think, I thought Don Steckel left, why is his picture on this? Why is his picture on this map? Don has joined us for just a few months to help us transition some projects. And we're super happy to have him back working with us for a little bit. If you want to say hello, Don.
Hi, everybody. I was going to joke I'm the ghost of PSA past for this Halloween season.
Yes. Well, and that kind of moves me to the next slide, which is kind of a bit of, we used this slide last year and we thought everybody really enjoyed it. So we wanted to do a new updated slide. And even though Gretchen is no longer working with us, we kept Lander. So once a PSA baby, always a PSA baby. And as you can see, a year has indeed passed. And I think these little ones just get cuter by the day, unlike perhaps myself by the day. But we're super happy that Lander, Bo, and Jimmy are all doing really well and growing, as you can see. So hopefully you will enjoy taking a gander at them as well. So that rounds out sort of the PSA team and our growing PSA team members. And what I want to talk about now is 2022 and what this has been in terms of a building and adapting year. As we mentioned, we've hired 3 new people. We're looking to hire a few more people, so you're probably going to see some positions open in the near future. We are settling into a new COVID normal, and it is changing the way we think about training. We're going to talk about, certainly the remote training coming up, but really optimizing training schedules, developing longer term plans for PSA functionality. We've been talking about in the old days, years past, we would send 2 PSA trainer of trainers to do it, train the trainer and not think anything of it. But now, because somebody could get sick and get isolated, we kind of have to have at least 3. So we're just really adapting to what that means with the PSA team. We're expanding into international training as a formal objective. This year, a cooperative agreement from FDA has us conducting trainings in Mexico. And so traditionally, PSA has really been focused on the domestic outreach, and now we have a formal international outreach component. And certainly preparing for new things. The beginning of this year, if you remember, December of 2021 was when Subpart E was delivered in its proposed format. We had a bunch of listening sessions and trying to understand what those new expectations were. Subpart E at some point will become final, maybe in 2023. Traceability is due to drop November 7th. So we've got some plans for sharing information about that. Certainly trade disruptions, one of the new fact sheets that I think Lori's going to talk to you about is a fact sheet we made because people reached out to us and said, hey, there's a lot of growers using biological soil amendments of animal origin that don't normally do so because they do not have access to chemical fertilizers, right? Because of trade disruptions. So all of these things have been part of our world. I'm sure they've been part of your world and are certainly changing the way we do things. Next slide. Here's some PSA training milestones. And before I go over this is a great place to stop and really say thank you to all of you. Thank you for showing up today to listen to the update and to pay attention to where things are going with the PSA. But anytime I look at these numbers, I recognize that it is really the result of across the board collaboration. And that collaboration would not be possible without all of you. And it is with sincere appreciation that we acknowledge all of the effort you all have put into these things, to trainings, to making sure participants have access to quality trainings, for doing all of the things we ask you to do, the evaluations, the registration, all of those things that are so important for us functioning the way we do. And I think the results show the immense amount of effort that has gone into this. So I really do want to thank each and every one of you for those efforts. As you can see, as of September 30th, 2022, and all thanks to Michelle for, again, always pulling these numbers and getting them done, we have almost trained, as of September 30th, 80,000 grower training participants, which is fantastic. There have been almost 3,500 train the trainer participants. And I know we had to train the trainer last week, so we're really close to that. We're at least up to 496. You can see train the trainer courses. When you look at domestically, there's been 97 of them, resulting in just over 2,000 trainers and 281 lead trainers. Internationally, there's been 25 train the trainer courses, resulting in 85 trainers and 224 lead trainers. The fact that our lead trainers domestically and internationally are almost the same is really fantastic. And again, really a result of collaboration across the board. In terms of grower training courses, there have been over 2,400 grower training courses. And internationally, there have been over 1,200 grower training courses. So again, you can see the participants there are very closely aligned. So that's a great sign to see, not only serving the domestic, but also the international markets. The next couple of slides are really just, oh, sorry, next slide. It's the policy slide, first of all. One of the things we did want to update was talking about data sharing. And this is important because oftentimes PSA gets asked to share information. And as you know, we do not share participant information. We do share training report numbers. We're happy to work to get you specific numbers if you need stuff. But we don't share real specific data about participants, because when we first were started, for those of you that maybe are coming to the PSA a little bit later than when we started way back in 2010, participants really did not want us sharing their information. So we protect that very closely, okay? And quarterly reports are produced, which include state and country breakdown information. And if we can help, I know we've been sharing some information, if we can help pull things that aren't too onerous, we're willing to do that. But that's why we do the training reports, is so that information is out there, that information is updated quarterly and easy for you to see it and use it. So if there's any, I'm going to pause here to see if there's any questions about that. Okay, moving on to the trainer directory. We just like to remind people, please update your training information. I know this is one more thing we ask you to do, but at least if people are looking for you, they can find you. And we do remove people. If you're not actively training, we will remove you from the directory, not remove you from being a PSA trainer. To be clear, we're just taking you off the directory. And the reason we do that is because people sometimes reach out, and if your information is not up to date, they can't find you. And if you haven't trained in a while, we just don't want you being viewed as an active trainer, right? So we don't want people pestering you if you're not actively training. So that information is all right there, and you can go ahead and do that. Thank you, Rob, for putting the trainer directory link into the chat box. Next slide. These are the pretty pictures that I was talking about. Here you can see, this is just a slide to show you the concentration of grower training participants throughout the country. I remember years ago when one of the states was white, that was why I think it was Wyoming, in our trainer course one. We have hosted trainings in every state, and now we obviously have participants from every state, which is great. The next slide is the international map. And a few reports ago, we realized we weren't really highlighting the international participants. So I'm glad to see this map, and I like it. There's also one in the report of trainings that happen internationally. So again, please take a look at that report if you want to see training information. Really good information, and I really appreciate what Michelle does to keep that updated. And with that, I get to hand it over to Donna, so you don't have to listen to me talk until the end. Thank you.
Hey everybody, I am going to pop in with a couple of updates in regard to training policies. The first thing I want to update you on is our extension of the temporary PSA grower training remote policy. So this, it was in effect until December 31st of this year. We relatively recently extended it to June 30th, 2023. And what we're really trying to do here is analyze the evaluation data. So one of the projects that Collins has taken on in joining the team has been analyzing data comparing in-person and remote courses, essentially just because we want to ensure if this policy is permanent that evaluation data supports that is the correct decision. So we've been looking at both numerical data as well as qualitative kind of comments that people write in on evaluations. And I just want to give you that quick reminder that we do have a 30 participant maximum for remote trainings. I know the evaluations that I see, I think often remote trainings are much smaller just because even 30 participants is a lot of scrolling when you're looking at participants on Zoom. But I just wanted to share that reminder with you. And we were very interested in taking a moment, sort of pausing the presentation of the slides and asking you all for a little bit of input on what you're seeing as the demand for grower training courses. So give me just a moment and I am going to launch a poll and I'll give you all 45 seconds or so to respond to the two questions on the screen. And this is really just, Betsy shared a lot of our metrics with you, our training metrics, and we're sort of looking forward and we're trying to figure out what is the demand for grower training courses. So I'll read it out in case anybody can't see the poll. No demand, low demand, or high. I kept the options pretty simple. And then secondly, do you think that all of your covered farms have attended a grower training course? And that is just a simple yes, no, not sure. So I'll give you all a few more seconds. I'm seeing a lot more people submit their responses and I will share those responses with you.
Yep, we're at 105 right now. Come
At
on.
least 72% of people are paying attention to this one. Okay, a couple more seconds. I see it slowing down. Okay, I am going to end the poll and share results. So let's see, what is the demand for grower training courses? Low 72%, high 27%. And that's something that we've been hearing demand, or we've been hearing discussion of. We are later in the presentation going to talk a little bit about Subpart E and some of our plans for Subpart E.
Donna, if they don't mind, if they're in the high category, if they wouldn't mind disclosing where they're located, that would be fabulous. If you just want to tell us like state, country, if you feel like your demand is high, I'd love to know that if you're willing to share.
Yep. Feel free to put that in the chat box. Okay. So Michelle,
Yeah, you don't have to wait. See if people dump in. If they don't dump in, it's not a big deal. You don't have to wait.
Okay. And then do you think all of your covered farms have attended a PSA grower training course? 23% said yes, and 53% said no. And I know that even internally with PSA and with collaborators and talking to you all, I think we've been trying to figure out how we can help engage those growers that have not yet attended a grower training course, whether they're covered or not. So I'm going to turn to the chat. It looks like now I see a lot of responses rolling in. So we see Florida, Washington. I think demand is moderate, but that wasn't an option. California, Maryland. Ooh, this is a great point. Somebody mentioned we're seeing younger farms come in versus the ones kind of retiring in 2017. And that's something that I know we've been getting a lot of beginning farmers or sort of farmers that are sort of new to the sphere. So they're interested in attending a grower training course.
I think Tammy Hill just said, Florida, it seems they don't want to attend until we show up to do an inspection. I think what's interesting, I appreciate that comment, Tammy, though, is if you look at this, number one, what's the demand? The demand is low. So 72% of you say the demand's low. What's interesting is number two, do you think your covered farms have attended? And 53% say no. right? So demand is low, but people still think a lot of people that are covered haven't attended. And that's covered. That doesn't speak to the growers that might need the training, even though they're not covered. So that's very interesting data set to me. And when I saw Tammy's comment, that just sort of, that merges those two ideas, I think, really well.
Okay. And
Sorry,
I'm going
Donna.
to move. No, I appreciate it. So I am curious. This is a chat box question. Let me stop sharing the poll. And this sort of the reason we set up this poll was to get to this last bullet. So how can we help engage and identify growers who need to be trained? Betsy said, Betsy suggested we add this chat. So feel free to respond to that in the chat if you have any suggestions for collaboration or things that PSA or others can do. But I know this is something that we've had a lot of discussions within PSA of how do we reach those growers? How do we, help convince growers of the need for attending a grower training course? Okay, a lot of us have larger inventories that haven't verified a portion of their farms. How do we motivate growers? Customer requirements, and absolutely, I know somebody had mentioned in the chat box, I think Betsy read it, that, a lot of growers, it's really having an inspector come out and saying, oh, okay, there's teeth to this requirement. I need to do this. And I know in talking to some collaborators in my region, sometimes, it's sort of, that's when you get, that's when you get the need. People realizing that there is a requirement here and that there are some ramifications if they haven't attended the grower training course.
Donna, Lisa has her hand up. Do you want me to allow her to talk?
Thank you.
Lisa, you want to ask a question? Oh, you can unmute yourself now. Lisa? Maybe Lisa has the same thing I have where it raises her hand and she doesn't know her hand's been raised.
And I also allowed Victoria, I see that you have your hand up. You should be able to talk as well. Oh.
You have to unmute yourself.
Okay.
Okay, Victoria put her hand down.
Yep.
And Lisa, okay, well, maybe they'll chime in.
Excellent. Well, thank you all. Any other thoughts about how to motivate and engage growers? I think tying into that market access, I've seen that come through in the chat box.
Somebody asked about carrots, and I know there is going to be some funding moving forward for some of this. We're going to talk about it later in the presentation. I also think based on some work we've done, if you can get a conversation with growers to talk about the importance, usually that convinces them to get more training. So sometimes it's just on the ground outreach of starting that conversation in a very informal way.
Okay. So I think with that, stipends, yeah, searching out smaller grower organizations. And I think piggybacking on other production recommendations, we had a big discussion with this on a webinar yesterday during our educators call, is kind of that double smiley face component. So tying food safety into, business practices and other production improvements. Okay, so with that, I think Betsy, do you have anything else to say? I think I'm going to move on. No? Okay, I do appreciate that feedback because this is a topic that we've had a lot of discussions internally with. So I'm always curious what you all as our trainers have thoughts on this. Okay, so we talked a little bit about remote training updates. I did want to give a quick update on our PSA online grower training course. And this slide is really talking about the English language grower training course. And just as a reminder, this is our 3-week asynchronous course. It is hosted through eCornell. And currently this is being led by the PSA team. There is a 14-day requirement that participants submit at least one discussion. So this grower training course, this online version, is relatively intensive. We see it takes a lot of participants, about 30 or so hours to take it. There's 6 required discussions and there's a few required quizzes as well. So they're really required to interact with the material as they move through that course. We do continue to have very high enrollment currently. I think enrollment is filled through or into March of 2023. And I did want to highlight the update part of this is our upcoming change in registration costs. So until now, I mentioned that this course has been led by the PSA team, and we've really been using our times to subsidize this course. Through the COVID pandemic, which is when we initially launched this training, there was a discount for the English version of the course. That discount is no longer going to be available into March of 2023. So we're starting to work with external PSA lead trainers, and that means that the full registration cost is going to be enacted of $450. So just wanted to give that update there. And I'll stop and see if there's any questions about that. Feel free to mention those questions in the chat box or the Q&A. And I'll stop if I see any that are coming in. Karen asked, do you know which states people are from who are registering for the online grower training? So other members of the team can jump in. I taught this last month, and I know in my training, we really saw from all over. We saw a few regulators attending this as a prerequisite because there's a prereq to take the grower training course. I had, West Coast participants, East Coast participants. I would say a pretty good mix from all over. Okay, and Karen asked if we can restate the remote training extension. Yes, so currently remote grower training courses through Zoom or WebEx are available through June of 2023. So through the end of June 2023, as we evaluate that evaluation data. Okay, so I'm going to move into my next slide. So we are currently finalizing the Spanish version of the grower training course. We do anticipate an early 2023 launch. And I want to highlight here's a screenshot. You can see this is what the Spanish version looks like from the participants view. Initial courses will be subsidized as we did for English. So the last couple of years, I mentioned we've been really subsidizing it with PSA time. We are going to be doing the same as we pilot the Spanish version of this online course. So this means that the courses are going to be offered for $125 per seat. PSA team will be teaching the initial courses. And as we start enrollment or as we open up the course, we will send an announcement through our listservs in the newsletter. So stay tuned for more details about the Spanish language online course. And with that, I'm going to hand it over to Mariana.
Yes, thank you, Donna. So just a couple of things that I will be mentioning today. The first one is since October 2021, so it's a year of this, there's been this prerequisite of attending grower training before you decide to take a train the trainer course. And this course that you're attending could be either online, in person, or remote. And so this is because we in PSA and other trainer of trainers have expressed the need of this prerequisite. And these prospective PSA trainers, which are the attending, the participants to these TTT courses, will have to be familiar with the content of the grower training before they attend this TTT. So this, and can you go next, please, Donna? And one more special announcement that we have, and that probably some of you have already seen, is that the face of our website has changed. We have a new platform that was decided by the Cornell University, but it was worked through our multimedia developer and database manager, Rob Way, who made this available 2 weeks ago for us. So as you can see, that there's different colors, different changes in the photographs, but most of the pathways should be the same as the previous one. So if you were familiar with our previous website, these new websites should have the same pathways for you. The tabs and the sub tabs that you're going to find are going to be the same. And some of the hyperlinks that we worked very hard, and by we I mean Rob, were really hard to have these redirects. So if you are sharing some of our hyperlinks in your websites, they should keep working. But if you find anything that is not working, maybe you want to go back to the new website and find if these have changed. And also you can always reach out to us if you think that some resources are not easy to find, or you were finding them somewhere else and now they're in a different site and you will prefer to have this in a different place. We probably could work with this. So that's all we have for now. And hopefully you find this attractive and as useful as always. And go ahead, Tommy.
Thank you, Mariana. All right, with the next few slides, we're going to be talking about a few updates with the PSA lead trainer application process, and then get into some general policy reminders as well. First, this probably isn't new news to anybody because we did send an update as well as start this pause on the acceptance of PSA lead trainer applications earlier this month. That pause goes through January 9th, 2023. And majority of that was due to the website migration to make sure that the new website is functional, because like Mariana said, that migration is going to impact the PSA web forms as well as a lot of those hyperlinks. This temporary pause also allows the team, though, to streamline submission process for PSA lead trainer applications. So the next couple slides we're going to go through kind of show that streamline. It is important to note, though, applicants who had already received their trainer short answer questions, they're going to get the same short answer questions. That doesn't change. We've just paused on the submission, so they wouldn't be able to submit those answers until January 9th of 2023. Next slide, please, Donna. And you can go ahead and hit next twice for me. So the main things we want to show, this is the PSA trainer flow diagram, and not much, again, has changed about the overall process, just some streamlining. The majority of changes have come in step 2 and 3B there that are highlighted in orange. So previously, a trainer applicant would fill out that first portion of the trainer application with their basic qualifications and educational background before they actually attended a train the trainer, and that was a requirement. So with streamlining that, now the application process, they're going to fill out that portion of the application as well as the short answers at the same time. Again, hoping to streamline that and make sure there aren't any discrepancies for information that's filled out when at the time of taking a train the trainer versus when they actually apply to become a lead trainer. You can also, we'll just move through this document quickly. You see the process again as it is sitting currently and hasn't changed too much. So once they apply to be a PSA lead trainer, the applicant is then considered either qualified for a lead trainer or would be split into they're either below expectations or needs further evaluation with some follow-up from that review committee. Next slide, please, Donna. And just following up and finishing up this flow diagram here, we outline again what below expectations versus need further evaluation and how that process looks. And this is, again, one of our resources that we have available to everybody as trainers and those who are applying as a lead trainer. And then also highlights the appeal process. If an applicant was marked as below expectation, how they could appeal that decision as well. Next slide. So with, again, kind of finishing up the lead trainer evaluation, just talking about the components of that application. Like I said, the components are the same. It's just the way in which an applicant fills out that application that has changed. So with that streamlining, again, the first part of the application is on their PSA trainer experience. So we're talking about educational background, training and teaching experience, as well as produce production and handling experience. And then again, followed by those 4 short answer questions that relate to each of the 4 competency areas, including knowledge on the produce safety rule. And next slide. So moving out of lead trainer applications, again, if you have any questions or comments, feel free to put them in the chat and the team I know can get to those. But a few policy reminders that, again, aren't going to be anything shocking or brand new for anybody, I believe, but just some things that we wanted to hit home today. First policy reminder regarding the grower training manual, stating that a printed PSA grower training manual is required for in-person and remote PSA grower training. So all participants must have that printed manual at the start of the course, or they're not eligible for that certificate of completion. again, just reminders that everybody has heard us say numerous times, but participants cannot be expected to print their own copies. And so if participants do not have a manual at the start of the grower training and throughout, they would not be eligible for that PSA certificate. Electronic manuals, regarding the electronic manual, it is available for download as a resource, but again, may not be used as a substitute for a printed manual for the in-person or remote courses. And we have that link there. Next slide, please. Just another reminder on marketing your courses. Donna did a nice job of outlining again the differences in our course and talking a little about the online course and where that's going or where we see it going next few months. But just to be clear on the policy on the types of courses offered, when we're talking about a remote course, we're talking about a course led in real time through a video conferencing web platform. In person, obviously pretty straightforward, but being that in person again, real time course delivery. And then online being that 3-week course completed at your own pace. Really highlighting here again that when we are marketing for remote courses, using the vocabulary of remote to not have that discrepancy or confusion for any of those growers who are participating in courses, whether they're taking a remote versus online. And next. And just a little extra reminder here, when we are advertising courses, making sure that we're advertising them as PSA grower training courses. Since there are so many other food safety training courses available out there, we want to make sure that, again, we're not creating any of that confusion for our participants in what course they are actually taking. Next, please. All right. Again, with our policy reminders, talking about the evaluation a little bit here. I think everybody is familiar with the in-person evaluation as well as the remote version being a Qualtrics evaluation. Just some policy that goes behind that, remembering that we must achieve that 50% return rate for our remote trainings. And if we don't receive that 50% return rate in 3 or more courses, the PSA lead trainer status could be revoked. So again, making sure that we are requesting that evaluation data and following up with our participants to at least receive that 50% return rate. In person, not many things have changed there, but again, noting that the in-person evaluation is that paper evaluation, and we can receive those back by either mail or also through scanning and returning paper evaluations from that in-person. Next, Donna. Huge reminder here, probably the biggest takeaway of my slides, do not reuse evaluation. So we're talking about paper or Qualtrics URLs. So again, noting that that evaluation is for that specific course and links that participant back to that course on that set date. And so we can't reuse links. We cannot reuse the paper evaluations as well. And
Tommy, I do want to pause here because I see a comment in the chat box, and I did look at the registration questions. This actually came up in what can we do for you? Somebody suggested they were having trouble with the evaluations, with getting people to turn in remote evaluations. So I do want to pause here. And Ariel asks, how are people getting a good return rate? This, to me, some people have no problem with it and other people have problems with it. I know from the PSA team perspective, and I'm going to go with Tommy on this one, we're relentless. It's like at the end of every break, at the end of every day, we're telling them that's our approach, is to just bulldog it, I guess is what I would call it. But I do want to pause, and if anybody wants to raise their hand and comment or put in the chat box, we would love to hear how you're successful at this.
Yeah, I would like to add something here that we have been using the Spanish-speaking team. We left 5 minutes before the last module 7, to doing together with them. So we share the screen and we start doing it with them. And at the end of module 7, we remind them, now finish module 7. So we go step by step and make them open the the evaluation. And in this way, we have been very successful here again with a Spanish speaking audience, but have been very successful.
So like Kristen and Laura's additions to the chat, if we literally begged, the PSA is going to come after us. But that's kind of like how Betsy was saying, our approach is, you know, I might not be the lead on that training, but one of us always has that link and hyperlink ready to just throw in the chat at every moment.
And I will say, I saw Kristen said, she says the PSA is going to get us. I will say that at PSA, when we train, we have to follow our own policies. And I also tell people it's our policy that we need this or else I'm going to get in trouble, because you best believe that Michelle Humiston will email me if I don't get 50% back too. So yeah.
And one more recommendation that I would like to add here. We have created a QR code, and we share that one too. So people would like, if they want to do it over their phone, they can just take a picture of the QR code that will direct them to the evaluation, and probably they're easier to work in the evaluation with their iPhones or their phones.
Nice. Yeah, thank you for the participation in the chat there. I think we're getting some good approaches there, and if anybody has anything groundbreaking, please put it there as well, so we can make sure we get more back in our own trainings. So Donna, I'll move to the last slide of mine, I believe. And final reminders that I'm gonna bring up in this section of slides, it's just along the lines of registering courses. So making sure that we're registering courses at least 2 weeks in advance really helps, again, streamline that process, making sure that we're not having any holdups. So that's giving APTO the necessary time to generate that registration and paperwork, as well as, you know, get that evaluation link in there. Important to note, retroactive registration is not accepted unless all paperwork can be presented. So that's including PSA evaluations, course documentation, proof of a PSA lead trainer, so trainer attendance. But that one is also subject to a $250 administration fee. So again, just important to note, but really having all of that upfront and making sure we are getting those courses registered on time. Really, again, oh, I guess last thing under that one that I should mention, if your training date changes, and I know this is highly likely, especially in the environment today of not getting as many folks as we think are going to participate in one course. If that date changes, make sure you are contacting APTO with that update, because that's going to impact the link for the course ID and the evaluation. So again, making sure that that evaluation is up to date and for the course that you are administering. And last thing here with PSA lead trainer responsibilities, I know we've talked on them through a few of my slides and previously before, but PSA lead trainers are those that are responsible for ensuring that all of that paperwork is completed and returned to APTO at the course conclusion. So again, regardless of who is organizing the course, it falls back on the PSA lead trainers. And also to mention, if there are multiple lead trainers in one course, all PSA lead trainers who participate in that course are responsible and subject to that potential lead trainer status suspension or revocation if policies are not followed. So it's not just on the main lead trainer, it's on all of us who are in that training that are lead trainers. And with that, I will turn it over to Lori, I believe.
Okay, great. Thank you, Tommy. So as earlier as Mariana mentioned, the PSA website has a new look, and there are some resources that we would like you to go ahead and probably do some new bookmarkings on. So the first one would be the PowerPoint Access bookmark for the URL. Version 1.2 grower training modules that are available on the Produce Safety Alliance website. Again, these are going to be available in English, Spanish language, Chinese, Korean, and Portuguese. So this is a new URL, and we are encouraging you to go ahead and bookmark this new one. As Betsy mentioned earlier, trainers can update their affiliation and other contact information on the trainer directory page. This is important as there have been individuals and organizations that were looking for trainers, but the information was not current on the site. So to benefit everybody, we're asking you to go ahead and take a moment and update your trainer information. Also, check the updates on the trainer update page. Here you can find things like upcoming meetings, trainer refresher series, especially one in English from last October and November, as well as the Spanish refresher series that was done this past July and August. And we'll talk about that shortly in a minute. And this is where you'll also find past meeting notes and webinars. Next one, Donna. With the new look of the PSA website, there's also a link from the main website page to access the general resource listings, which enables you to access additional resources and documents that will be beneficial to you as a trainer as well as your growers. Now, as a trainer, you can access additional resources that you're going to need, such as how to set up a grower training course, teaching tools and supplemental tools, module activities to incorporate into your trainings, all from the resource link on the new website. Next. There is a new fact sheet from the Produce Safety Alliance, if you haven't seen it yet. It's the produce safety factors to consider when using biological soil amendments of animal origin. With the potential of chemical fertilizer shipments being disrupted, growers are looking for alternatives to use on their farms. And so this fact sheet was created to help growers understand the challenges when using biological soil amendments of animal origins and to help them to manage the microbial risks through proper treatment and use. Also, just as a reminder that the PSA Grower Training Manual is now published in Korean and joins the other grower training manuals that have been translated into Spanish, Chinese, and Portuguese. Next. You may be familiar with this, but if you're not, the alternative language policy that we have, there may be times when the current PSA manuals and the corresponding slide set may not meet the needs of all the participants, maybe due to current training materials not being published in the language, or maybe the attendees have limited literacy. So enter the alternative language policy. Trainers can choose a delivery option that best fits their situation. There are 3 options to choose from, each uniquely different. The policy can be found under the PSA curriculum, Alternative Language Delivery Policy. The use of these alternative language delivery options will increase the planning and organizational efforts of the trainer. So if you're planning on this, make sure you take this into consideration when you are looking to develop a training under this. If you're interested in training, contact Donna at the email that's shown on the screen. Next. So More Than Words has been out there for quite a while, but I just kind of wanted to do a quick update on this. So the project itself helps to illustrate the concepts of the produce safety rule without using text. It contains complex regulatory language and scientific information and helps to bring those into perspective through the use of pictures. There are currently 15 illustrations uploaded that cover topics such as establishing no harvest buffer zones, packing house flow, considerations for food safety, exemptions and exclusions, determining a farm's status, among others. These illustrations were created in collaboration with the local Food Safety Collaborative. Next. So trainers can use the illustrations to promote discussions within the group, as well as using the teaching guides to help guide the discussions. These illustrations will provide an opportunity for learners to engage with the regulatory information and the scientific information in an alternate way to help them enhance their learning experience. The site will be updated on a regular basis, so remember to stop by from time to time. These will be translated into Spanish in the near future. Next. And if you're a new trainer, or even if you want a refresher, the PSA has a couple of oldie but goodie resources for you that we're going to review again. The first one, the training concepts for PSA Grower Training Module, which is a core of recommendations to assist delivery of a PSA Train the Trainer course. This is a great resource if you're wanting some good tips and tricks to use in your trainings. It's also the Grower Training Refresher Office Hour recorded webinars that are available for each grower training module. And these can be found on the PSA website under the Trainer Resources. They were originally developed to train new PSA team members, but we shared them and found that it was valuable to other trainers as well. So they're out there for everyone to see. There are plans to record a new refresher for Module 5.1 once the proposed Subpart E has been finalized. And I'm going to turn it back over to Donna.
I want to jump in here for a second. Thank you, Lori, for presenting those. And again, based on, just want to go back to the information you give us so that you know we're actually listening to the information you give us. On that registration information, there was a lot of requests for additional information, additional slide sets, additional support for Subpart E. Doing the Train the Trainer last week was good for us. Let me say this, good for the PSA team. Donna was tasked with presenting 5.1, and it was really interesting to see her navigate all of those slides. And I know our collaborators in the Southern Center have done this as well in trainings. And so the reason for doing another 5.1 to share with you all is to show you kind of how we think it works and the questions we got, and sort of to work through that as a resource for you all. If you think that's not a good idea or you don't need it, let us know. But that's kind of the thinking. And again, it's a very fresh idea based on our experiences last week and based on what we're seeing you all tell us based on the feedback in the registration. I also wanted to highlight when Lori was talking about the alternative delivery policy. That came about because people contacted us because the policy was giving them trouble because they needed a different language, or they were having to train folks that were having literacy issues. The reason I want to highlight this is if you are having a problem, if there's something in the policy that is causing you to not be able to serve the growers you need to serve, we don't want to be the road bump. We don't want to be the roadblock, I guess. So let us know. And if there's something we can do, we're happy to take the effort to modify things to get it done. Our first and foremost concern is always that the growers have access to high quality training, but that can happen many ways, right? And the policies are there. I've always said this, the policies are there in a transparent way, because if there's a problem, then we can have a discussion about how to fix the problem, right? That's why we write our policies down. It's not because Donna loves writing policy or that the rest of the team loves reviewing policy, because I can tell you it's not their loves. I can tell by the smiles they have, it's not their loves. But it's important because it's how we transparently share what we think needs to happen, right? So we appreciate the feedback. Let us know if there's stuff we can do. And we really are trying to listen to you and make modifications to what we're doing so that we can give you the information you want from us. Okay, thank you, and sorry to jump in there.
Okay, so I'm excited to talk to you about some of the new things that we're working on, including the Produce Safety Educators Group. So the English Language Educators Group has been around for quite some time. It's been around since 2013. We've hosted 62 meetings. I always like to mention this because in talking to PSA trainers and collaborators, there are still folks that haven't heard about the educators group. And I think we have some really cool webinars coming up. So I just kind of a quick reminder to you all that this educators group does exist. It is open to the public, so you do not need to be a PSA trainer. And I do want to highlight, yesterday we had Kristen Woods, Gretchen Wall, and Billy Mitchell on to talk a little bit about building interactive elements into your produce safety training. So we talked about that one yesterday, and these webinars are recorded. So probably by the end of the week or so, you'll see it up on the educators group website in case that topic interests you. In terms of upcoming topics that we have, we're still fleshing out the logistics and the dates, but we are going to be doing a call on the final traceability rule. as well as Subpart E, specifically harvest and post-harvest water, because we do have those compliance dates coming up soon. And I'll talk a little bit more about that in a few. And I mentioned that we have some fun new stuff. One of those things I wanted to mention is the Spanish language educators group. So this is a group that runs in parallel with the English one. So there is sometimes some duplication. I mentioned a webinar on the final traceability rule. We will be doing that in Spanish as well. But a lot of times we have sort of standalone meetings. So we started this group in 2021. So far, the Spanish language folks have been going strong. They've been hosting them every month for a little while now. And just like the English version, the recordings are available from past webinars on the Spanish website. So the next one that we have coming up is on November 9th. It's going to be about environmental monitoring programs and sanitation of equipment surfaces. And yeah, so I just wanted to highlight that for you all in case that's something that you're interested in. I sit in on all of them, A, to help answer questions, but also just to help improve my Spanish. So I really have been enjoying that webinar series. Okay, so Betsy stole my thunder a little bit in talking about some of the upcoming Subpart E work that we have. But I wanted to highlight that here because I expect for PSA, as well as all of you all listening to this call, Subpart E is going to be a huge topic of work in the next year or so. So I pulled a couple of slides from our supplemental slide set, which we mentioned a little bit earlier. And this is the first slide in that slide set, and it really just kind of generally broadly describes what the proposed Subpart E requirements look like. So these proposed revisions, for anybody who is truly listening in on this webinar as their, one webinar a year of food safety, maybe this is news to you, but I expect a lot of you on the call you're probably somewhat aware of the proposed revisions to Subpart E. So those were released in December of 2021. Essentially, these proposed revisions move from testing as a primary metric, so moving away from that microbial water quality profile into primarily using an agricultural water assessment as that decision-making process. So one of the big things to highlight here is the expectation is for the growers to set their standards and understand why these standards are appropriate for their farm. So instead of being handed, a couple of microbial criterion and using their microbial water quality profile, it's kind of looking at this ag water assessment as a whole, and the growers are going to be expected to explain their decision-making to inspectors. So we do have a set of Subpart E supplemental slides that we released in September. These are available in English and very recently in Spanish as well. And let's see, so these supplemental material, I see a lot of familiar faces on this call. I know many of you attended our educators call back in August about this topic. So what we did is we took all of the feedback. We asked you all a lot of questions. We had a lot of conversation in the chat box. So we took that feedback from you. A lot of your questions we tried to find answers to and added that into the notes of these supplemental slides. As Betsy said, I presented these last week at the Train the Trainer course, and it was definitely an experience. And so what we did here is we have slides on what the proposed requirements look like. We have slides on the compliance dates, and then we also really tried to give recommendations on how to present that information and where within the grower training course. And as Betsy mentioned, we are looking at re-recording refresher. I think kind of presenting these slides in a Train the Trainer format, but with tips on, okay, here's where you can mention one of the new requirements or one of the proposed requirements, and giving those little tips, because it is certainly a challenge, I think, fitting everything into an hour, depending on what your grower training agenda looks like. Okay, so these next couple of slides, I wanted to highlight the compliance dates. And you'll see this slide says supplemental material, and we did make a small edit to this version compared to what is currently listed on the PSA website. So we are going to update the supplemental slides to make this edit. And what this slide used to say was FDA proposes Subpart E compliance states as the title. And then it said FDA proposes compliance states for harvest and post-harvest water. We edited that language to remove proposed because these compliance dates are set. So just to give that background, the compliance dates for harvest and post-harvest water were about a year ago initially. And then if you remember, FDA said, okay, we have enforcement discretion in place. And essentially what this means is FDA is going to be removing that enforcement discretion for harvest and post-harvest ag water requirements. So that means that enforcement may begin as early as January 26, 2023 for that largest business size. So I really just wanted to highlight that change to the supplemental material because that is going to be a significant change, I think, for a lot of people, just as we help farms prepare for harvest and post-harvest requirements. And I'm going to take a moment and pause here to see if there were any questions about that. Nope. Okay. So we will be updating the supplemental slide sets with that minor change. And the other thing I want to mention here is the actual proposed compliance dates for pre-harvest ag water requirements. This is another slide that is in that supplemental slide set. So for anybody that this is new information for, that largest business size, the proposed water related compliance dates are 9 months after the effective date. And it's phrased like that because we do not yet know when Subpart E will be finalized. Okay, so we recently added this slide in because we've been receiving questions from PSA trainers asking about, okay, Subpart E is in flux. We know we have these proposed requirements. What happens now? Do we still have to present module 5.2? And the answer is yes. Currently, the requirements written in module 5.1, which is agricultural water production water, those requirements in 5.1 are still the requirements in the produce safety rule as they're currently written. So it is a requirement that you still present all of those required slides. However, a couple of reminders here or suggestions. Trainers, you all can opt to skip optional slides. I mentioned that I presented this last week at the Train the Trainer, and I still included some of those supplemental activities to get engagement, but I kind of moved through those optional slides a lot more quickly. And then I ended up adding the supplemental slides in at the end. So we kind of presented, okay, here's what's currently in the rule. And then I presented on those supplemental slides saying, okay, but here's what's proposed, here's how we expect it to change. I would recommend to you all as trainers, make sure you have a plan on how to fit that extra material within the time frame. So in my case, we moved through that discussion of a microbial water quality profile a little more quickly. It's important to still present it because for those of you who have read the proposed Subpart E requirements, there's still a discussion of the microbial water quality profile to support that ag water assessment. So you still have to present it, but you can kind of move through it more quickly and then make a plan for how you're going to fit that in. And again, it's a reminder that you have to be clear that those supplemental slides are proposed requirements. So, they might change before they're finalized. But in the end, you can decide how much depth to cover, but you still do have to present all those required slides. Okay, so I'm going to pause. I see there's a lot of movement in the chat box. So if anybody wants to pipe up with any good comments, or if there's any questions to be answered verbally. Okay. Okay, are the new supplemental slides for the introduction and water? So the supplemental slides are specifically for the Subpart E proposed requirements, but they do really focus on the production water requirement or production water proposed requirements. Okay, and then somebody asked how long module 5.1 took. I think it took me about an hour and 15 minutes because that's how much time we left on the agenda. And I was pretty careful. I was pretty careful to try to keep a lot of the engagement. So we really still talked about agricultural water, the definition, because that still comes into play in the proposed Subpart E, but it took me about an hour and 15 minutes. Okay. Good questions and good comments in the chat box. So we talked a little bit about the PSA requirements for presenting module 5.1. I wanted to show this slide here that says assessing water systems now, because in talking to growers, you walk through module 5.1, but then in the end, they're like, well, what should I do? We're still in a holding pattern. We've been in a holding pattern for a while. So I like ending on this slide. And this is a slide in the PSA grower training course. We added this last sub bullet at the bottom, but we're still recommending that growers continue testing their water. A lot of growers are testing it to meet buyer requirements, right? To meet their GAPS audits. And it's still an excellent way of understanding the quality of their water sources. But we sort of highlighted in orange the last bullet. We are starting to encourage growers to think about other water management strategies, such as water system surveys, and to identify and reduce risks. And I did want to put in a plug here that we are actively working on materials to support these strategies. So PSA is trying to sort of, as Subpart E is proposed, we're trying to create materials so that when it's finalized, some of those resources are, more or less ready to go. Okay, so moving the last few slides to talk a little bit about Subpart E outreach. Just a reminder of what is to come once Subpart E is finalized. We will need to make some pretty substantial changes to the grower training course, the curriculum. We will likely be calling this version 2.0. So until now, we've had version 1.0, 1.1, now we're on 1.2 because the updates have been relatively minor. But we are going to be doing a version 2.0. And what I want to really present on this slide is that every module will be impacted. Some modules more than others. Obviously, module 5.1, I think we're going to rewrite the whole module. Module 2, is also going to have some substantial revisions, but every module is going to be impacted. Even just thinking about some of the proposed impacts with adjacent land use and things like that. So just a heads up, and this will have to be a consideration for curriculum translations as well. Continuing on with proposed Subpart E outreach, for those of you who attended the educators call on ag water on Subpart E, this slide will probably look somewhat familiar. I just want to highlight here that we almost have 3,500 PSA trainers, as Betsy presented earlier. So thinking about how to update everybody is going to be quite the task. We plan to host several PSA Train the Trainer, we're calling them Ag Water Edition, to update trainers and lead trainers. These will probably be remote and in person. Again, this is all sort of proposed and we're really trying to wrap our heads around how we're going to be doing this. And I want to highlight this last bullet that we anticipate participation in an update training will be required, but I want to highlight here, we don't anticipate that attending an entirely new Train the Trainer will be the requirement. We expect it's going to be really, presenting, it'll be like a small or shorter Train the Trainer. It'll be presenting module 5 and really any other big important changes to the curriculum. So again, not an entirely new Train the Trainer course, but it'll be more like a short update. And if there's any questions, I think everybody's answering them and I'm looking at the clock, so I'm going to keep going, but feel free to ask any questions in the chat box. Okay, so I want to highlight Subpart E outreach, getting growers trained. Again, as Betsy mentioned, together, you all have trained almost 80,000 grower training participants. That means they're also going to have to get updated. So we probably are going to be hosting several update trainings for grower training courses, again, remote and in person. And we expect that we'll be developing like a module for you all to also help assist us in updating people. But we will be requiring attendance, or it may be required, but we will certainly be tracking it. And again, we're just sort of trying to plan ahead and figure out how we're going to approach this undertaking. Okay, a couple of last things to wrap up the Subpart E discussion. I just want to highlight that we are working on updating our resources. So our extension fact sheets, our required records document, that's going to have, assuming Subpart E is finalized in a way similar to what the proposed requirements look like, we will be adding several required records to that fact sheet. We are looking at developing materials to support implementation of an AGWA, an agricultural water assessment, a research database of water quality resource, and developing a kind of an in-person workshop, that module, to help growers perform an AGWA. So just looking forward, there's a lot of need for outreach and materials. And I think that's sort of a very broad, brief snapshot of some of the things that we're working on now, and we're kind of looking ahead. But I did want to take a moment and pause and ask you guys in the chat box, after hearing some of that input and some of that proposed outreach, we did really try to listen to what you all said in individual conversations and during the August educators call. But is there anything else that jumps out to you immediately? And what is your biggest concern about implementation of new Subpart E? So I'll stop for 45 seconds or a minute and let you all respond in the chat box. Okay, biggest concern, here we go, now they're rolling in. Biggest concern is training stakeholders, absolutely. Helpful from PSA in the short term is to hear how we can best prepare growers at winter meetings for post-harvest water inspections, knowing that they're going to be happening in January. For example, what does an annual inspection look like in practice, records, and how it is different from a gap audit? Thank you, Annalisa. I think, I know internally at PSA, we're talking a lot about post-harvest right now, because that's where the first compliance dates are coming up. So I will say we'll definitely think about that and take that recommendation into consideration. We are, I mentioned as chats come in, we are looking at doing an educators call in January. So thinking about harvest and post-harvest. So I would definitely encourage you all to join that educators call or listen into the recording. How to standardize what is considered during the assessment and how it will be regulated. Would their certification be pulled or revoked if they do not attend once it's finalized? So Jacob, I want to point out, because that's more of a PSA training question. That's a great question. And Betsy, feel free to chime in here. Would their certification be pulled or revoked if they do not attend the Subpart E training? I don't know if I can answer that. I don't think we've decided that, or I don't think that is ours to decide, but I will say the growers are still going to have their certificate. So I think the answer would be no, and I see Betsy's nodding. So I think the answer would be no, because attending that grower training was one and done. Attending an update would be more so that they would know how to, they would be informed on the current requirements of the produce safety rule. But Betsy, you want to jump in?
Yeah, I mean, the reality is a lot of inspectors don't even ask for the training. They don't ask if they've been trained. They don't ask if they have a certificate. So I cannot see us revoking a grower's training certificate. I could see us leaning on the trainers pretty hard because it is going to be a new module for trainers, and we want to make sure everybody's on the same page. But in growers, I'm with Donna. The whole purpose is going to be to provide them with the best information we have when it changes. So I can't see us doing that. I absolutely can see us, and the whole team right now is going to have a big sigh, trying to keep track of who we've trained so we know how many growers we've reached and how many we still haven't reached. I can see us putting a fair bit of effort into making certain growers know there's an updated module so that they can attend it, but I cannot see us revoking their training certificate.
Thank you, Betsy. And I'm scanning the chat box in the Q&A, and I see a couple of similar questions. So I do want to make sure that point is very clear. Excellent. Okay. And there was a question in the Q&A. If you were a trainer who does not hold training sessions, will you be able to attend Subpart E outreach? Absolutely. So what I expect is that these Ag Water Edition Train the Trainers will be open to any PSA trainers. But again, this is very much proposed. I will say this. The reason we're telling you this and asking for this kind of input is because we're going to save down the chat box and go through all of your comments and definitely take this into consideration. Okay. Perfect. Okay, I have a couple more slides before I'm going to stop sharing. And
12-minute mark of an hour and a half. So we've got quite a few slides, just so everybody's on the same page.
Yep. Okay, so the last two slides before I turn it over to Betsy are really quick mentioning the proposed traceability rule. This is a proposed rule published September 2020. Betsy mentioned earlier that it is set to drop November 7th is what we've been hearing. And the proposed timeline for implementation is 2 years after the effective date of the final rule. There is more information there, but I just wanted to mention that we do have this on on the horizon, and we have been developing some educational materials. So this is more of a heads up once the final traceability rule is finalized. So we have drafted supplemental slides, and we will be posting them on the website once the rule is finalized. We are planning an educators call on the topic, probably scheduled for late November and early December. And then lastly, I wanted to highlight this great resource. New York State Department of Ag and Markets, NYSDAM, has developed a guidance for produce traceability, and Rob is going to drop that resource in the chat box. There's a lot of very good appendices and resources within that guidance document.
And there was also a recording of an educator's call.
Yes, yep.
That we did with Jen Trodden from NYSDAM.
Yes. And I am going to stop. I am going to, pass this over to Mariana.
Okay, great. So for the PSA Spanish language efforts, as you saw in the map, we are still expanding. We're now 4 Spanish language extension associates. We're working hard to making sure that all the materials that are produced are in both languages, Spanish and English. So we're working hard on those translations. And we have been hosting a lot of those grower trainings in Spanish, and we're also having scheduling and hosting some Train the Trainer in Spanish. We have a big effort into developing new PSA trainers too, either domestically and internationally. And we're going to have a lot of different new projects coming up, which one of them is this new podcast that is coming up, that we're going to be developing a series of podcasts in Spanish. And as always, please reach out to us if you want to collaborate in this Spanish language efforts. Next, Donna, please. One more announcement or project that we have been working on is international trainings. So we have this new cooperative agreement where we're going to be doing several grower trainings. These are focused on Mexican growers, onion, mango, and melon producers, growers. So if you have any connections in Mexico that can help us find all these growers, please reach out to us too. We have worked this year delivering 3 grower trainings in Mexico in the Yucatan Peninsula, very close to Cancun. We worked with dragon fruit growers. We had 3, as I said, 3 grower trainings. One of them was delivered actually in Mayan by a translator so we could use this alternative language delivery policy. And these were very well taken in. This was to serve a Mayan community that are big producers of this dragon fruit, and they want to gain access to the US market, and they want to comply with all these food safety requirements needed for this. Thank you, Donna.
Okay. And
Okay, Donna, I've got them if you want me to switch over.
I am going to stop sharing and let Betsy share because my PowerPoint decided it's not functional.
Okay, so sorry about that. Come on, baby. There we go. 2. Okay. Right screen, can you see them?
It's in presenter mode, Betsy.
Oh, sorry, I'll swap screens. There you go.
You go.
Edit. Okay. Thank you, Tommy, for letting me know. You all disappeared, so I can't see your faces. Okay, so I'm going to take us to the end, and it's going to be quick because we got 6 minutes. PSA Advanced Trainer Training. We took a break during COVID because the course was not really a remote course. If you're any familiar with it, it's a lot of hands-on. We hosted one in June of 2020 here in Geneva, New York. We started looking very specifically about whether or not we were reaching our goals. And it turns out we're not really attracting active PSA trainers. We're attracting a lot of departments of ag. We're attracting people who want more training. But it's a huge concern because it was developed to improve PSA trainer knowledge and comfort with the content areas, or should say content, not contact. We think this has to do with costs. So we've been thinking about how to, come up with supplemental funding because the course is really expensive to host. It takes a lot of trainers. There's a lot of infrastructure needs. There's a lot of usable chemicals and compost piles to buy and lots of things that require a lot of funding. So the thing is we have a tentative one coming up February 6th through 10th in Lake Effort, Florida, of course, in collaboration with the Southern Center and Michelle Danilek. We are interested in hearing from you as trainers to find out if you're interested. If you're interested, what stopped you from attending? And I do want to give Michelle an option of jumping in here and saying anything she might want to say. I know time is short, but did want to sort of talk about this a little bit because this is our audience and sort of intrigued. No, Michelle's good. All right, so if you're a trainer, thank you. If you're a trainer, tell us in the chat box why you maybe haven't attended or maybe you don't know it's an option. And I'm going to move on because time is of the essence, but I will monitor the chat box because I can see the chat box even if I can't see you. Another thing we wanted to talk about was that all of you should be aware that ACTO certificates for other income countries, those besides high income countries, have been changed to $15 based on World Bank designations. The intent is to make the cost more equitable. And it is the responsibility of the PSA lead trainer to identify the participants in that course and go ahead and determine the correct cost. So, so that's really important and just wanted to share that. Moving along. What can PSA do for you? These are a couple of questions I know we've talked about, and these have actually come up already. So we may want to move past the first one, which is what are things we can do to support you, because we've talked a little bit about registering and hosting and how to get growers to show up. If there's any additional resources that you think would be helpful, other than things you've already shared, again, we've talked about some stuff in water. We got a lot of comments in the registration page about stuff people are interested in. Please do put in the chat what you're specifically interested in. Okay, so I see a lot of stuff going on in the chat about funding for the advanced training, but also feel free to put in the chat stuff about what other materials you want us to see, and be very specific if you can, because things like fact sheets, it helps to have a pretty narrow topic if you want us to work on something. All right, I'm going to keep moving in respect to time. Wanted to let you know that right now PSA is pretty well funded through September of next year. We have some FDA funding through June of 2024. But once that cooperative agreement with USDA lags, current outlook is that we'll be at about half of our funding needs, and that's just not sustainable for the PSA team. We've discussed issues like trying to get included in Farm Bill, but this takes support from lots of states and people. And other funding structures just don't fit what the PSA does, mostly because we have a lot of personnel and that's pretty expensive. We also respond to changing needs, so having specific tight objectives is difficult. What I will say is this: if you value what the PSA does and you talk to people who are involved in things like funding, please tell them that you value what we do, because it really is going to come down to whether or not we stay afloat and move forward. We do have a plan that if things get tight, how to close down the PSA and, you know, tie it up and turn our lights off. But we don't want to do that. And we think with the water stuff that's going on, we do feel that there's a need for the work we do, but that's going to be really determined by whether funding stays available. Did want to mention this USDA FSA program financial assistance. We did leave the one that has the QR code on it. There is funding to support folks getting trained. There's an informational webinar November 3rd, 2 to 3. That's coming up next week. The registration link is there. We can also put that in the chat. Just wanted to share that information with you. I said this at the beginning, but it's a great way to end. Thank you for your time today and certainly every day. We really, really appreciate everything you all do. No question is too pesky. You don't have to worry about insulting us. If something is not working for you, let us know. I so appreciate it. I was in DC a while back and one of the trainers pulled me aside and said, here's where I think you have some trouble that I think you need to deal with. And I appreciate those comments because that allows us to constantly be looking at what we're doing, updating what we're doing, trying to make this thing run as efficient and as productive as humanly possible. We've already talked about, we will make changes to policy if they're necessary. We will do things differently. So we're always open to ideas on how to make things better. I think it's really important because time is the best resource we all have, and we want to use everyone's time wisely. As I look at my clock, it's 3:30, and that brings me to the last one. We will have an update webinar. I want to remind everybody, November 30th in Spanish. So this whole thing in Spanish. Our next annual meeting, you can see there, is October 24th of 2023. Look at us planning ahead. And November 28th of 2023. I do believe, Donna, there is also a quick Qualtrics survey, I think, that you're going to see.
Yep.
And there it is. 3 questions. That's it. It's very quick. And I'm now going to look at chat for just a second while I give you guys a chat.
Can I answer a quick question, Betsy?
Yeah, go ahead. For sure.
I saw a couple of questions coming up asking about upcoming Train the Trainer courses. Recently we hosted a remote Train the Trainer course last week, and there was pretty low registration. We meet the minimum, however, it was pretty low. And I know there was a Train the Trainer course scheduled in the Southeast that was canceled because of low registration. So I would just encourage, I know there's a lot of new hires that if you see them scheduled, do go ahead and register. But in terms of looking forward, we are looking, I believe, at having one in January. It's not yet posted on the PSA website, but we are kind of looking at 2023 and planning the next ones. So just, and when we do that, we will post it, through newsletters, through all of our normal avenues.
Yep. And really thank you guys for all the comments. There was a lot of good discussion, a lot of questions. Definitely want to thank the PSA team for presenting, and even those that didn't present, participated in editing the notes. So I just want to say thank you to the whole PSA team. As always, they're right there and really working hard every day to make sure our materials are up to date and the high quality they need to be. So with that, I think we're done. Donna, since you started, I'll give you the last word.
Nope, that's all. I do just really appreciate the chat, and we're going to download it and look through all of your comments to a lot of those questions that we posed. So just really appreciate all of the feedback and all of the questions and participation.